Lord Adonis, chair of the European movement. He was part of, some really big beasts, a cabinet of big beasts under Tony Blair some 15 years ago. Andrew, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure, are you in Brighton
I've
with
just
Labour?
arrived in Brighton.
You've
I have
just
the
arrived in
delights of
Brighton.
the seaside
It,
and the Labour Party conference.
is the sun shining? Because it's pretty gloomy
No,
here in London, Andrew.
no, the sun never shines at party
Oh
conferences,
dear, oh dear.
as you well know.
Well, I must
It's
confess,
meant to be endured, not to be enjoyed.
in fairness, Andrew, it may surprise you to know that I've never been to a Labour Party conference, but I do need to ask you, have you read and learnt by heart the 13,000 word essay by Sir Keir about the future?
I've read it. I'm afraid I haven't learnt it by heart, but I think in its own terms, it's a perfectly good pamphlet. I like this idea of the contribution society that people should be expected to put in. You know, this is JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I think that sort of is a very broad and socially uniting theme. But of course, we're in the middle of a lot of challenges facing the country, and whilst pamphlets
We
with
absolutely
big
are,
ideas are good,
and therefore,
addressing the problems is
in,
good too.
indeed, and so whilst we agree we've got lots of challenges, Andrew, it seems that Sir Keir Starmer was focusing quite a lot on sort of what I would call boring electoral process, which hasn't gone so well for him, rather than actually grabbing people's attention with some solutions to the challenges. You know, how you're going to deal with the energy, how we're going to get cheaper energy for tens of millions of people up and down the country, and how we're going to get the economy growing again.
Well, I agree with that. I myself don't think it's much. There's much point in spending your time on internal constitutional matters. I don't think people are much concerned about the precise process by which the Labour Party leader is elected. They just want a good leader, and they want them to start providing solutions. And you're right, energy is one, but of course the equally pressing one is this big shortage of lorry drivers.
Ah, yes, I thought you might come on to that.
And I'm strongly, I mean, you and I had a big disagreement about Brexit, but whatever your view on some of the underlying causes, obviously it's right to be issuing lots of visas and encouraging people to come and actually get the trucks moving, because it's in no one's interests that we have empty supermarkets and fuel stations that are having to be closed because of partly a lack of delivery,
for sure,
and I think because of panic buying, because people think that there may be a big shortage in the future.
Indeed, I think there's a real question, because whenever the government says don't panic, of course, because we can't trust a single word this government says, because they've been flip-flopping around, one almost believes exactly the opposite. But and you obviously think that if you issue some visas, there would be some lorry drivers who might come from across the EU. But as we understand and read, Andrew, actually this lorry driver shortage it's almost global. It's certainly Europe-wide.
But I can't say. But it's important to separate the ideology here. There are a lot of people have a lot of views on whether or not it's a good idea to have international lorry drivers coming here, and I respect those views, but we're in the middle of a crisis at the moment, and so what is the argument against making a large number of visas available? Indeed, because of changes that are being made, consequential on Brexit, people are going to have to show passports, drivers, a whole lot more bureaucracy and red tape that didn't exist before. The right thing to do in what's becoming a national emergency is to strip away the red tape, welcome people here. We don't know how many will come, and there'll be other things that need to be done too. They, for example, should get on rapidly with conducting more tests.
Well,
exactly. There's been a massive backlog of tests, all kinds of things. But what you should do in a crisis, which I think you probably agree, Richard, is you should fire on all cylinders.
Definitely.
You should do all of the things that you can do to get the country moving.
I agree with firing all cylinders. I agree with pragmatic solutions. I think you and I are agreed on that. I think there is a testing crisis. You've got to remove some of the red tape. I just think that the big business lobby groups have played this lorry driver shortage, the loss of EU drivers. I think they've played that hand. Probably they've played it quite well, but I fear that temporary visas would turn out to be long-term visas. And I rather like the idea, Andrew, that British drivers are earning lots more every hour, every week.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea of empty supermarkets and panics in fuel stations. And I don't actually think that the lorry drivers themselves like that. What we obviously need is a country that works. I want to see higher pay for truck drivers and other people who've been on low pay. That's completely right. I want to see a much higher minimum wage. I think we should be addressing all these questions. But when you're in the middle of a whirlwind, as we are at the moment, you should try and and stop the damage being done.
So, Andrew,
It's not in anyone's interest to have empty supermarkets.
Would you support, for example, bringing in some of the army logistics drivers to help, either whether it's with fuel or whether it's with the supermarkets? We've got some fantastic committed servicemen and women who could help.
Yes, I strongly support it. Obviously, it's firing on all cylinders, means using all of the professional support you've got. And as you say, you've got lots of logistics people in the armed forces who could help. So I completely agree with that. As I agree with accelerating the tests. I agree with recruiting more testers. We should be expanding our testing facilities at the moment. And I agree with a lot of temporary visas and waiving red tape, which at the moment is stopping EU drivers from coming here. We should do the lot so that we're not in a panic situation which is gripping the country at the moment.
Absolutely. And I read with some sort of horror, whether it's true or not, that some of the testing examiners were thinking of going on strike because they were asked to do more tests per day. Where are you on that sort of nonsense?
I wasn't aware of that, but that would be a very irresponsible thing to do. Again, when we're in a national crisis, you do expect people, all to come together and do their bits, and that certainly would be very inappropriate. So I very much hope that doesn't happen.
And what's the key thing, Andrew, you want to hear from Sir Keir Starmer when he gives his leader's speech in this conference?
What Keir's got to do is offer a very clear plan to get the country moving again. The country, partly because of COVID, for reasons beyond the control of any of us, has literally stopped. I mean, it's had a kind of heart attack over the last 18 months. So obviously it's recovering from that is important. But we've got a lot of other things going on too, including, I'm afraid, the consequences of Brexit. And what he needs is a clear plan for investment, for jobs, for getting people into productive employment. For example, young people at the moment coming out of schools and colleges this year, there's been a fall in the number of apprenticeships. A fall. I mean, that is an absolutely criminal state of affairs, and
Madness.
He needs a clear plan for getting things moving. And I think the public would respond to that. What he doesn't want is the Labour Party looking inwards and still crazy things, calling Tories scum, which
Ridiculous.
One senior Labour person did. That's reprehensible. That shouldn't be happening. All this talk about mass nationalisation. Can you imagine what Middle England thinks about spending hundreds of billions of pounds on owning things which we could regulate better anyway? We've got to focus on the things that really